Hello, welcome to the W3C Technical Working Group call for Thursday, the 16th of December. This will be the last meeting of the Technical Working Group for 2021. We'll be looking through the remainder of the membership proposal. We might even make it all the way through as far as we can, but we'll see how we go. I'm just going to introduce everybody on the call for the sake of the recording, and then we can crack on with the document. So in the order in which people appear on my screen, present on the call, we have Debbie Giordano from Everyone Active, Stephen Winfield from GLL, Matthew Davies of Spots, Nick Evans of IMIN, and Nathan Salter from Playfinder Book Tech. And I'm Timothy Hill of the Open Data Institute. And I've got some notes here that some people are going to have to hop off the call early. So I'll begin with any other business in that case, just so everybody's got a chance to voice their concerns if they have any. So those that need to leave the call early, is there any points you'd particularly like to see addressed and forefronted in the course of the call? You know who you are. Okay, I'll take silence as a no there. I'll start sharing my screen for the presentation. Okay, is everyone seeing my screen? Fantastic. So where are we? There's the membership proposal link if people need that. I'll paste that into the chat. It's also in your invite. So on the previous call, we made fairly swift progress through section 5, dealing with barcodes, and section 6, dealing with adding entitlements to customer accounts. There was an addition of an appendix there, so that it was possible to list changes to customer accounts in a separate feed, rather than having them, rather than having them accessed over individual calls. That's right.
Yeah, instead of polling. That's right.
Yeah, instead of polling. Yeah, thank you. So on the current call, I was hoping to get an update if there was anything to report regarding MCR active requirements. And then it would just really be going through the remainder of the document and its appendices. With a slight asterisk on the addition of section 9 there, that's actually something that was declared out of scope earlier, but possibly any reporting from MCR Active might influence that decision. So I guess I'm looking at Nick to see if there's been, and Debbie, about whether there's any further requirements emerging from MCR Active.
Do you want to do that, Debbie, or should I? Don't mind.
I guess all we've got to add is that we had the discussion around dependence and the differences between what we would normally expect versus what MCR would like, which is just the adult and just the emergency contact details for those over 8. After discussing with the business, we're happy to go with that solution for open data instances. I think there needs to be some sort of control mechanism built in for those age limits and the criteria. What am I trying to say? So if a different operator, a different client wants a different age limit, then we ideally need a way of controlling that, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That constraint has been added as a new issue in the booking spec, I believe.
Okay, great. Okay.
We have written something.
Yeah. Yeah. Playways was responsible for issue number 300, so we've broken some kind of some kind of record there. I felt like I should give them a prize.
Yeah, the 300th issue. Actually, sorry, no, it's not. That was inaccurate. It's not 300. It's issue 223. I was thinking of the other. Exactly, it is.
thinking modeling spec. We're not at 300 issues of the booking spec yet. We're at 223. So
Okay, a mere 223. Great. Okay, but it is logged in issue 2223. Good. So requirements are clear there, and yeah, capturing the emergency contact over some age and how that's communicated remains to be determined is a requirement that everyone active is happy with and suits MCR active as well.
It's also worth saying that from that discussion that the dependent accounts. Well, actually, I should ask that question. Debbie, did we? My recollection from that conversation is that we still wanted to do dependent accounts for the scenario where there was a family account on the MCR side, so that we would get the children linked to that adult for the cases where there was a family account. Is that right? So
so I think there's 2 age limits, isn't there? That's my understanding. So if you're under 8, we'd expect a family account and a dependent account to be created. If you're between the ages of 8 and whichever the maximum age is for that client, in MCR's instance, I think it was 18, then we'd expect just emergency contact details to be added to the child's account, but no additional adult account to be created. And those over 18, there's no requirement for any family association.
Perfect. So then, yeah, that brings section 9 into scope of the discussion, it sounds like, on that basis.
Okay. Okay, so we're starting then with I think probably the trickiest issue, section 7, display of entitlement pricing, but also one that's been extensively discussed earlier. So let me just take us into the document. Section 7. So this is really about the difficulty of representing the correct price and at what stage to end users, given that a range of prices suitable for a variety of different users is published in the open data feed. Now, broadly speaking, the solution there is to rationalize the number of discounts and combinations that is possible. And in cases where systems have got lots and lots of different distinctions that they draw and also the ability to combine them, this has to be simplified in representation in the open data feed. I think we've hashed over those points earlier. I just want to do a broad survey of people on the call to see if they feel that those issues have been satisfactorily resolved or whether there's still elements of this that need unpicking. And I'm just reviewing it myself, obviously. And this is a point that we'll be revisiting later on in the appendices as well. As there's a question, I suppose, about how you represent items that are open only to members of the particular provider. Any further concerns to be addressed there from anyone on the call?
Seems reasonably complete to me.
Okay, good. Yeah. Yeah, we have reviewed this before, but I just wanted to make sure we all had a common understanding there. Okay, good.
I did actually have one quick question on the entitlement. I don't know if that was a separate question. The bit at the bottom there about the customer booking restriction. Mm-hmm. And now this is just a question for the group, I guess, about that. So I think it does definitely agree it works as it stands. However, would it be useful for customer account booking restriction to be a SCOS vocab? We love SCOS vocabs right now. Instead of an account, just a set of strings. And the reason I say that is, should we be helping people to filter by, or maybe actually, hang on, am I saying this right? We might, it should not need to be SCOS to filter, because I suppose you could actually just filter on strings, couldn't we? if you were kind of wanting to list certain open data. But just thinking about whether that would be a thing that would be of interest to do that.
Could you not filter just by the entitlements that you have on the customer compared to the offer?
What it was more thinking like, for example, for a customer that doesn't, let's say that the customer doesn't have a gym induction, sorry, so a customer doesn't have a gold membership, and you might want to filter those out or something like that. It doesn't really work for that though, does it? So maybe
that's an entitlement, isn't it? So you would expect to be able to filter by entitlement, but that's something slightly different, is it not? And
yeah, do you know what? You're right. Okay, sorry, I'm just creating. Let me formulate my question properly, and then I might raise it against everybody. But you're absolutely right. It doesn't make any sense. Please carry on.
Sorry, now I'm confused. Okay, so the force of this is the force of Matt and Nathan's comment was that this is really just an entitlement type. So having this property present is not terribly useful.
No, it's a different problem. So if you wanted to filter out certain for certain entitlements, you would use the entitlement type. That's how you would give people relevant results for that related to the entitlement they have. This is different. This is just saying that even with certain entitlements, you wouldn't still be able to access certain things. But I think this is different to a filtering problem. This is about giving the user an indication of what they need. Sorry, what constraints might exist around particular, like at the browse stage, exactly.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So the gym induction required, for example, which I know that so it's not about filtering.
Okay, so this is very much about prior to authentication at the browse stage, right? Okay, so yeah, so there's simply not that information. That entitlement information isn't in the system yet. Okay. Okay. Then we can move on through 8. Now, I will confess I was mystified by 8. I had the impression that it wasn't finished. What is the purpose of section 8, I suppose, is my question.
When you say not finished, sorry, how do you mean?
Well, I just read this and I was a bit puzzled by why it stood as a separate section, and I was wondering if there was sort of additional detail that needed to be unpacked or what really.
Maybe the appendices cover that.
Right.
There's a random new line there. Just remove that. But,
yeah. The large blank made me also wonder if something had been removed.
No, I think it's probably because of the complexity that lives in the appendices.
Right. Okay.
So so how you make a booking through a customer account. That's
right. Okay.
There's an appendix on that specifically.
Right. Okay. So, do we simply want to cross-reference to make that more clear, or do we just have even a footnote somewhere saying, for details of online booking through a customer account, see appendix?
We can, I'll just add an appendix reference. It's a pretty good idea.
Yeah. Okay. Just to clarify, because right now it doesn't really say very much. So.
I mean, it's because there really isn't that much to say, actually. I mean, it's pretty much use the bookings, use the same flow as you would use with some minor tweaks. So I forgot which appendix that is.
Let's see.
Appendix F. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so
sorry, can I just clarify something quickly? There is a sentence that says guests of the customer account are permitted via additional order items. What's that referring to? Because I can't see that in the appendices.
So I think it might be. Might be 3.
Oh, I see. Yep. So it's basically still allowing anonymous bookings
Yes.
after authentication.
Yeah. So if I'm an authenticated customer, I can bring an anonymous guest.
Right. I see. Yeah.
But it's but anonymous, but they know who I am as I'm the authenticated customer. So it would be friend of user rather than Bob or Jane.
Right. I see. Oh, because the customer account is on the order item level rather than the order level.
Yeah, because in this appendix, it's in the attendee that the has accounts being specified.
Okay.
So idea being that yeah, that's it. So you specify this has account property in the attendee, and therefore that attendee is a different account. Or if you don't specify a particular attendee with the has account property, then it's assumed that the attendee is an anonymous attendee.
Yep.
Because you haven't specified who they are.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So this is exactly the mechanism that could be used to book on dependents. For example, you could say, I'm booking on behalf of my child, then the customer makes the booking, and then the attendee is the has account of the child. So you can book for your child, assuming they're a dependent account, you have access to book on their behalf, etc.
Yes.
Or on behalf of yourself, I'm making a booking for me, the attendee is me, the customer is me.
Sorry, Debbie.
There's two different things there to me. We've got book for others, which is I'm the person that's the known logged in. Yeah, the person that's logged in and is known, and I want to book for somebody else that I am associated with, and that person is also another known person. Then there is I am a known person and I want to book somebody else in that is anonymous. But those anonymous additional bookings over and above the individual that are logged in is dependent on the configuration of the activity. So is that would be taken into consideration as part of, there's not an expectation that guests could be added to every type of activity, I guess is my point.
Guests could be added to every type of activity. Could guests be added to every? Don't guests get added to every type of activity anyway? As
No.
guests. What's an example?
So, badminton.
Oh, for facilities.
Well, yeah, not just specifically facilities, but that's an example of an activity, regardless of whether it's a class or a facility, is that you would book, in our world, you'd book that solely against the individual.
Yes.
But you wouldn't have the ability to say somebody else is coming with me, because the configuration from a Gladstone perspective doesn't allow that.
Yeah, so for facility bookings, because there's only, if you book 2 people onto a badminton court, you'd book 2 badminton courts rather than 1 badminton court, which is probably not. So you can't book 2 people onto 1 badminton court because there's only 1 space. There's only 1 court.
I could do if it was configured that way, but that's my point. The configuration is in our control.
Yes, if you configure it that way, though, wouldn't it be a session with density booking?
No.
No. No. If you configured it, you could book 2 people on a badminton court.
Yeah.
What's the use case where you book 2 people onto a badminton court?
If you want to charge per person for the court rather than for the whole court. It's not something we do. We have done it in the past. It's not something we do now, but I get my point is it needs to be driven by the configuration of the leisure operator system as to whether an additional person can be booked in, a guest with that individual. So if you, I guess your mind is working around classes and stuff like that, but there's two ways of booking. You can book in individuals as individuals, or individuals as a party booking as well. They're called party bookings in the Gladstone world, but where it's me and 4 extras that I'm bringing, but those extras are unknown, but they're not booked in individually. They're just assigned as extras. So there's different combinations to consider, and I guess I'm just pointing out that that's the control from that's within the leisure operator system, whether that's possible or not for that session or for that activity or for that facility. It's not driven by this.
So I believe that, well, at least the conversation, we had this conversation with Gladstone, I think they were going to do a mapping so that it would work for all of those combinations. The only one we didn't talk about, because I think they were going to, you know, if it's multi-party, they were going to map it to the attendees were going to be in the multi-party. If they weren't, then they weren't, that type of thing. But the specs as they stand, I don't believe support facility booking multiple people on. So that is a gap that exists, I think. So I don't think we can do a per person booking on a squash court as the specs are currently written. You'd have to do a per squash court payment. It sounds like, though, Debbie, that doesn't matter from your perspective, so you're not doing it. But Stephen, do you have any per person squash court? Or
no, we don't. We used to, but we don't anymore. Similar to Debbie.
Oh, interesting.
But you may have other operators that come along that are doing it in that way, and I guess that's my point. It needs to take every possible ability into consideration, doesn't it? Otherwise, something's going to fall down at some point, and people are not going to understand why.
Yeah, that is a really interesting one. How does that work when you say per person squash? When it used to be that way, if I booked as one person using a squash court, not as 2 people, is it half the price? How does that work? Or do you just need 2 names to make the booking and have it full price?
No, the person whoever's booked in is charged the same price. It doesn't matter whether there's 1 booked in or 2 booked in or 5 booked in. You set a maximum number of bookies per facility, and each person pays the same price. It's just the way that it was required to do, I think, when we took over a couple of contracts in the past. And squash is just an example, because obviously a facility type booking can be for anything, really. We can use it for whatever we want. And I'm just thinking of the scenario of lockdown where we had to switch between sessions and facilities to cater for different scenarios because we needed to introduce new restrictions and all of that sort of stuff. So this needs to be able to cater for every type of configuration, because the operator may switch at any point.
Well, so that is a question about that particular gap, and how does that, so just in terms of that one, if there's 2, so are we saying that you would get a squash court would get 2, so squash court costs £5, let's say, or badminton court costs £5, and I want to go and play. Am I paying £5, or am I paying £5 and my friend pays £5? How does it work?
You would pay £5 and your friend would pay £5. But as it stands, yeah, the initial person reserves the space, and then anybody extra is booking into that same space. At
a cost, the same cost.
Yeah. That's how our configuration would work in the Gladstone world. I'm not sure about the Legend world or any other systems, but that's a possibility.
It's like a session in terms of the way it works, isn't it? It's like a class. You all pay £5.
Yeah, but it's not set up as a session. It's set up as a facility.
Yeah, because it's slot based. Gosh, well, that's fun. Maybe we leave that out of scope for now. It's difficult, isn't it? Because it won't. I don't know. Or do we try and do we? If we do, to try and resolve that, we would probably need to think about. I don't even know how we would. Well, we have to think about that. Should we keep that as a point of, maybe raise that as an issue, as a gap in the booking spec for right now, and then should we have a look at a viability of whether how easy that is to solve? If it's easily solved, then maybe it's worth keeping in. But if it's going to require massive re-architecture at this stage, given it's not something that's needed for, I don't know, what do people feel like, or should we try and solve it either way?
It would be much clearer to me if we were able to say, here are all the possible scenarios of a way to make a booking in the leisure operator systems, and which ones are in scope, which ones are out of scope, and how are certain ones handled.
So this sounds to me like another requirements conversation, really, if it's about having a kind of matrix of possibilities. I think the other difficulty, the question of whether it needs addressing, is really an evidence one. That if there's one leisure center that does this, it's an edge case. But if there's actually a substantial number who have at least the option of doing it that way, then it does need to be addressed.
I can't speak for the leisure operators. You don't know who's going to come along, do you? And
yeah, no.
be
So
using
really,
Gladstone, and because that configuration option is there, they're allowed to use it, and they might be using it in some cases.
so Debbie, we've got standard activity, density activity, party activity, standard class, density class, party class. Which of those is this?
It's none of them. It's it's activity, but it's not party activity.
It's not density activity.
No.
Interesting. Is it density party activity?
It's nothing to do with density.
Okay, I don't know. It's not in the scope as it stands in the, anyway, this is getting to a very Gladstone specific conversation.
Yeah, we're focusing just on that one exception, which is worrying. But my overall point is, like,
yeah,
it's if it's going to cater for every combination of possible setup.
Also, what from Gladstone, it already caters for standard activity, density activity, party activity, standard class, density class, and party class. And I believe it caters for the option equivalents in Legend and in Flow, because we've had those conversations too. But what we're talking about there is obviously, I don't understand why that isn't in the list of the different options that Gladstone has provided. So are there any other gaps in that list that I've just read out? I guess that's the thing I'm worried about. Like, how many other options?
I don't know, because I don't have that good a recall to remember what you just read out, if I'm honest. Like,
oh,
I don't.
sorry.
You read them out that quick, I wouldn't be able to remember what you read out. But
hang on, let me just stick them in the chat for you. There you go. That's the list.
Sure.
There's that will be a separate conversation.
I don't know if it's helpful for this conversation, but we're intending to do a similar thing with Playfinder and BookTech, but we're going to be doing it as a broker level rather than at the booking system level.
How do you mean?
Well, so if you're booking a squash court between two people, essentially we take a proportional payment from each person, and then we book that as a single booking under the main lead booker.
Yes, which is supported by the specs as they stand.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. I'm just trying to think how we move forward with this. It sounds like this is actually purely a Gladstone.
Tim, shall I work with Debbie to just identify gaps from the list that we've already identified is covered? Whatever gaps missing, we will raise those as additional issues in the booking spec, and then we can pick those up. Is that good?
Yeah, that sounds about right. It sounds like it might be a W3C requirements call ultimately,
Sure.
but yeah, let's just canvas what we're looking at.
Yeah.
If it's quite niche, then maybe it's not a problem, but we need to assess that first. Yeah. Anecdotally, my neighbor just joined the local tennis club, and he'd booked for himself and two other people, and then somebody already present at the tennis club came and joined them. And he got a note from the tennis club the next day saying, "We saw you on CCTV with an additional person that you hadn't booked. Please rectify immediately." So yeah, it can be crucial to the revenue model of
wow,
some organizations. Yeah. Anyway, wasn't best pleased, not the best customer relations, but yeah, it's an operational reality, I guess. Okay. Yeah, and he was complaining about this just 2 days ago. So yeah, very live issue. Let's see here. So adding and removing dependent accounts. Again, this has been talked about to some extent, but it wasn't clear that it was in scope for this conversation. However, it sounds as though it is indeed in scope. And I think we've probably hashed this out if the requirements are clear at an NCR active level. But in detail, oh yeah, sorry, it's now coming back to me, the modeling conversation. So modeling for dependent accounts is, as it says here, as a single group in which the customer account is an admin of the group, like a WhatsApp account. This allows for the model to evolve in future to allow multiple groups to include a single customer account, inviting of existing customer accounts into a group and promotion of those accounts to primary status. I suppose very broadly, does that raise red flags for anybody on the call? It's a very loose bag approach to how this is handled. So it's very flexible, but is it too flexible?
I mean, yeah, as it stands, Gladstone haven't got this sort of functionality.
Right.
They are looking at a book for others, which has been pushed out in one of their applications. But that book for others is not an invite to the group or switching primaries or anything like that. This is you are already associated to me, and therefore I can book on your behalf.
Mm-hmm.
It's not allowing somebody to update or change those associations or invite people as such.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to creating member records at the start, so if that member doesn't already exist in the database, in the leisure operated database, then there'd be an expectation to create a parent account and a child account and associate them with each other, as we were discussing before, if they're under a certain age. So under 8s in MCR's case, we'd expect 2 separate records to be created. So I'm not sure whether this is 2 different things, because there's a booking for others, which is one bit of functionality. There's associating records at the point of creation, and then there's associating records that already exist. And associating records that already exist is a little bit of a grey area to me, because you've got to somehow know the information about the individual that you're searching for, and the results that you get need to be quite hidden from a GDPR perspective. The last thing you want is to put in the wrong member ID and something to be returned with information about somebody else that isn't anything to do with you. So it is how those methods would work.
Mm-hmm.
So the way that this is, oh, sorry, go on.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to make a very sort of banal point that, yeah, I guess how it's modeled, I suppose, is different from how it's restricted. So we can model things like this and then add conditions to that modeling. But sorry, carry on, Nick.
Yeah, so I was going to say, yeah, so this currently does 2, yeah, it's good to separate those things. This supports 2 different things. This supports creation and it supports linking. The way it supports linking right now is it depends on the broker having the person that you're trying to link already registered and logged in to the broker system. So you can't link, the broker can't set up a link between 2 people that the broker hasn't already got themselves connections to, in the way that this is currently approaching it. So basically, if MCR want to link 2 MCR active records together and they both have the permission from a GDPR perspective to do that, they can do that. But what they can't do is just do a blanket member search across the whole database with all the personal details that entails. I guess, as Debbie's pointed out, there's some significant GDPR challenges with blanket member searches to make links. But if they've already associated themselves to their family through the broker anyway, and the broker's got ways of doing that that are GDPR compliant and all the rest of it, but that's up to them. They sort that out. Then yeah, this allows to make that connection. So it doesn't lean on any functionality in the booking system per se, in that the invites aren't sent by email or anything like that. It's all within the APIs. So if a system was to implement this, it wouldn't require them to necessarily have fully fleshed out invite linking stuff. They might, for example, it's possible that a system might might only do this in center, with a member of staff present, but they also have the facility to allow brokers to do this, and they don't have it natively in their system, and there's no email capability and all the rest of it. And that's the design of it as it stands. Does that make sense? I was kind of rambling.
I guess so. I'm just trying to go through my head, like, where you've got this bit as assigning somebody as an admin or a primary, and the promotion of those accounts to a primary status. Is that intended to change anything in the leisure operating system? Because what you wouldn't want is a primary to be a primary in the broker's world, but not the leisure system, would you? So you've almost got to update the two if that gets changed.
Yeah, that's the idea. Is exactly that there's the ability to update the system to match. So it's called administrators in the API bit further down, but basically, yeah, you give someone, you make like a bit like a WhatsApp group, you make them an admin, and you remove them as an admin. You guys use WhatsApp? Sorry, I'm using WhatsApp analogies.
Yeah, I use WhatsApp, but I guess I don't really liken this to WhatsApp. Like, in my brain, it doesn't.
Yeah, it's the groups functionality in WhatsApp. This is Wayne from Legends analogy I'm borrowing. So how one administrates a WhatsApp group, you add people to the group, and then you promote them to admin, or you demote them from admin, and you remove them from the group. That's the things you can do. So that and the group in this context is a group of people that can book, where the admins can book on behalf of the non-admins.
Yeah, I think you just need to. I just want to work through what that is expected to do in Gladstone, because if I'm a primary of a family in Gladstone, I wouldn't want somebody to be allowed to be demoted from being that primary, because then all of that family are no longer associated to a primary, and we've no longer got a primary contact for that family.
Yeah, so I don't think you can remove the last primary in WhatsApp. You can't remove the last admin from the account, from the group. Is that what we're saying?
Well, yeah, you're likening it to WhatsApp, which is not the same as the Gladstone database in my view.
Sure.
You can't have more than one primary, but you can have more than one admin in the WhatsApp group. So there's a fundamental difference there.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
So it's understanding what is intended to happen in the cases of the primary is trying to unassociate themselves, or a link to a primary is trying to unassociate themselves, and what's intended to happen in those sorts of cases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's worth working through for sure.
Yeah, it feels like what we have here is a very generic solution to what is conceptualized by systems as a very specific problem, which is not necessarily a weakness, but I do worry that it means implementing systems that cater for a much broader range of use cases than systems actually encounter.
Yeah, it's difficult. Basically trying to create a model that is so generic that it will work for everyone, but also it can be limited. So for example, if in the case that Debbie mentions there, there is a limitation around number of admins, that's just a restriction that is that can be workable within the system, within the arrangement. Because I suppose it's difficult because we can't I guess we can't mandate like a maximum functionality for this kind of grouping, because it sounds like systems will facilitate different like levels of functionality of the grouping.
Yeah, and I come back to the question of payment, which I think was almost sort of definitional in the last call we had about this, where what makes a primary customer account fundamentally different from a dependent account is the existence of payment information in the customer account, or the ability to pay in the primary account. And dependent accounts don't have that ability. Is that a rule that is widely observed or worth stating as a frequent restriction, or is that just a false understanding on my part?
The person who's financially responsible for the group. Oh, I see. The primary is the person that's financially responsible, but anyone can make a booking.
So this makes sense as a rule if you think of the primary as being a parent and the dependent as being children or other wards. It makes less sense if you're thinking about it as maybe a couple that also have a family associated with them. But then how do you know, how do you decide which is the primary? Is it the case that if you log in as a member of the group who also has payment information associated, who's getting billed?
Well, it's a good question, I suppose, for Debbie and for Stevens in terms of the planned work. Can you be part of more than one group?
No.
No.
Yes.
Ha. Interesting.
Yeah, you can have a dependent who's part of whose primary is the mother, and then can be another group where you're a dependent when the primary is the father.
Mm-hmm. And they can choose when they make the booking which primary to make the booking on behalf of.
Yeah.
So it's
it could be an actual fact that the relationship with one of the primaries is purely a booking relationship, where the relationship with the other primary is a payment relationship.
What's the difference between those two? Sorry.
Well, one might be just a booking relationship and the other one's a payment relationship. So going back to Tim's scenario, where you've got a primary is the person who's responsible for the payment, that isn't necessarily a true definition in our view, because a primary could be somebody who's just got responsibility for the account. It doesn't necessarily mean they're responsible for the payment, because somebody else could be paying for the membership for the dependent.
So is that because there's another primary in that work?
Yeah, well, yeah, because we're talking about a dependent here, aren't we, being in more than one group? I think that's what the question was, wasn't it? Can you have a dependent in more than one group, or was it a primary in more than one group?
No, a dependent, but actually it's a good question on the primary. Can we have a primary in more than one group?
Yeah, a primary. I don't know, actually. I can't think we've come across that scenario. Can a primary be? Yeah, because a primary can be a dependent in another group, can't they?
But they can't be.
We've discussed this. This is one of our requirements.
So a primary can be dependent in another group. In Flow, but not in Gladstone.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the payment element is kind of irrelevant as well. If you're making a booking and you're the one that's booked into that activity, the sale is associated to your account. It's not associated to your primary's account or anything like that.
That's interesting. It's not associated with the primary account. So does that mean that in Gladstone, Debbie, does that mean that the child would need the credit card of the parent on their account to make the booking?
Doesn't mean that they need the credit card on their account. No, it just means that the sale is on their account, is on the child's account, because it's the child that's booked into the activity.
So where does the payment detail when they make the booking? Is the credit card that they're using to make is that on the parent account, the credit card?
It depends if the parent has saved the card to their account. So
Right.
if the parent, I mean, the Book for Others thing isn't live with Gladstone yet from our perspective. It was being worked on still for a long time, and I think it's gone out to some of them, but not all. We're not included in the people that it's gone out to at the moment because we had problems with it. But what would normally happen is I would log in and I would book something. At that point, I'm asked if I want to save my credit card details. Yes, I will. Once the Book for Others capability is there, that means I'd be able to book for my child and pay using the stored card that I've got on my account.
So it's
paying off the transaction that's on the child's account.
So in that case, the payment and transactions on the child, but you're booking from the parent account.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. I see. But that's a specific to where Gladstone stores that data, I suppose.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So actually, as long as from the model perspective, we're talking about in open booking, there's a customer and there's an attendee. So the customer is the person that makes the booking, which is the parent, and the attendee is the person that obviously attends the session, which in that case is the child. Then that seems to work in terms of, and then yeah, Gladstone may choose to store that sale wherever they store that sale. It sounds like the reverse is available in the GLL flow system, which is that the customer, the person making the booking, can be the child, actually, and but they're using a parent's credit card from the parent account. So it's a kind of on behalf of situation where you're booking using, parent's credit card, but the parent's not involved at all. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct, Nick.
Okay, sorry. So for my understanding, so in the GLL world, the child can log in. The credit card details are actually on the parent account, but the child, when they click, book session, that payment automatically comes from the parent account that the child account is associated with.
Yeah, the primary.
Right.
Yes, correct. In most instances, that's likely to be the parent, but it might be a grandparent, for example.
Right. Okay. Okay, so true in one system, false in another. And you couldn't have two primaries then, I guess. The very word suggests that there's only one primary per group. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, right. So there's no ambiguity about who ends up paying there.
Oh, that's interesting. So only the primary can pay in a group. Is that right?
It's not about the
No,
primary.
no,
It's
no,
about the
that's
person
not what we
that's
said.
logged in. It's logged in.
Right.
From a Gladstone perspective, anyway, it's the person that's logged in is paying for whatever's booked, whoever it's booked for.
Yes, I understood. So, and in the flow system, is it the primary that pays, or is it anyone in the group who can pay?
Anyone who can pay within the group with permission, if you've got permission to use the payment method.
Which you provide so
Yeah,
the group says you can use my payment method.
Yes, correct.
Right. Okay. So I think a saving grace here might be that luckily payment's out of scope. So great. So we don't have to worry about that. Thank goodness, maybe. So in which case it's just about who can make a booking for who's permitted to make a booking for who, and that might be clearer across systems to identify. So it sounds like in assuming that the payment is being covered, then in all cases across Legend and Gladstone, anyone in the group can make a booking for anyone else, assuming that the payment's covered. Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that the same for you, Debbie?
Well, as I said, it's not out there yet, the Gladstone Book for Others product,
Mhm.
but I'm not sure if I'm look, and I might be looking at it in the wrong way, but this is just the way I understand it. So the person that's logged in, regardless of who that is the person that pays for the bookings that are made.
Mhm.
If they've got permission to make bookings for other people,
Mhm.
then they will still be required to pay for those bookings.
Yes. Perfect. That lines up. The question is, can they make bookings for anyone in the group, or is it only people who are their primary, or is it only people who are their dependents they can make booking for?
I think they've built in some sort of user control which says who can book for who in the group.
Okay.
And
does
so
that mean,
it's not by default, it's a customer's decision.
Hmm.
and is that the same for you, Stephen? Is there permissions on who can book for who, regardless of payment?
Yeah, that's correct. That's the way we're designing it. I mean, it's similar to Debbie that this isn't actually done yet. This is just all in the planning stage, requirement specification stage. But we've talked about it a lot, so that's my understanding.
That's great. That's really great. So actually, okay, so there's really clear consistency there then. So there's a group, and then within the group, there's a primary, and there's who can make bookings is permissions based. Well, I guess the question there is how complicated are those permissions? Is it that everyone in the group just says, yes, anyone in the group can book for me, or anyone can't? Or are you naming individuals, you know, so and so can book, so and so can't?
I think we were naming individuals, but there's also an age rule.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, that was dictated by the primary who can book. The primary assigns the permissions to the group.
Who can book on behalf of everyone, or who can book?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's to be defined, but it would make sense that they could book on behalf of everyone, wouldn't it? Because why wouldn't they if you're in a group together?
Yeah, so it's not like only John can only book for Harry, but Sue can
Yeah,
book.
that doesn't make sense. So it's everybody in the group.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, great. And sorry, Debbie, on the Gladstone system, is you were saying that it's age based as well.
Yeah, there's an age rule. I don't know, Nick. I'd have to. I don't know it well enough because we're in that situation where it's not been released to us yet. So
Sure.
I'd have to go away and do some digging.
Yeah, sure. Well, that's
Or
good.
if you can get Gladstone to have that conversation with you, I guess.
Yeah, that's it. Well, I was just thinking in terms of getting a straw man down that kind of roughly covers the scenario and make sure that it does, and then we can double check it with Gladstone. Sounds like we're pretty much there with, you know, taking payments out. The group can book, anyone can book on for people they have permission for within the group. There's only one primary.
What do you mean by taking payments out? Sorry, I'm not sure I understand that bit.
Because payments in this world, in the open booking world, are handled by the broker. The payment would be made. I mean, if people were paying on behalf of other people, that would all be handled anyway by the broker. So that's not something that we need to worry about. By that I mean, it might be possible that although someone doesn't have permission to pay for someone else in Everyone Active or in GLL, they might have given permission in the MCR system to make payments, because payments are handled, you know, MCR, the credit cards are stored in MCR, and, you know, etc. So, or any broker. So we don't, which is good because it means we don't need to worry about permissions for payment because they're handled separately. So we just can forget that problem and focus on who can make bookings, which sounds like it's where maybe the challenge is.
Okay.
So I guess we'll just need to get a little bit further clarity on the permission situation there for who can make bookings for who. I mean, the other option here, which probably is, you know, it might be. I'm just wondering if there's. We probably have to check this. Is we just don't put permissions in, and or rather we like default them to like allow. Like if the primary adds someone to their group and that person accepts the invite, then they've given permission for anyone to make bookings. You see what I'm saying? Like, make it really easy. So in the groups we're talking about here, anyone can book for anyone else, except for the case where they've added a specific block, but they do that blocking. They'd make that block configuration in Gladstone or in Flow. So we obviously it would respect any existing permissions, but we don't have to worry about setting those permissions. We just respect the ones that exist.
I feel like that does simplify it considerably. I mean, it puts the responsibility, I suppose. Well, the booking systems already have that responsibility, though.
Mhm.
Yeah.
They have the permission systems, however complex they are. Yeah.
Well, working towards them. Let's not say have them. Working towards them, right?
Yeah. So there, what we're really saying is that because these are groups that are controlled within an MCR, and there's also a fair bit of logic here that says if groups are being created in MCR, we probably don't want to be applying permissions, because if they're different across systems, that's going to get really confusing for the user, because you're going to tick and create permissions across 2 or 3 different systems when you create your group. And yeah, I can book in GLL, I can book for this person. Yeah, it's going to get. So if they've never, so maybe if they're creating a group, it should just be a very simple group where everyone can book for everyone by default. And yeah. It sounds like, as Stephen, you were saying, that the default is actually that you can't, if you join a group, you can't book for that person by default. Is that right?
Yeah, because you might have somebody who's only 6 years old in the group, for example.
And you wouldn't be able to book on behalf of them, or they wouldn't be able to make bookings.
Yeah, that they may not be able to make bookings because you want to restrict. So what we've baked in is the ability for the primary to dictate what the permissions are for the dependents within that group.
Right. Yes, that's the thing, isn't it? So it's which dependents can book from the primary's perspective. But if they could, but if through this mechanism they were able to book, but MCR was where the restriction happened. I guess what's the worst case here, that the 6-year-old goes in and makes a booking, I suppose, is what we're trying to avoid. Is that right? They go in and book when they're too young.
Yeah, potentially there could be booking something that they're allowed to book via the operating system restrictions or eligibilities, but the primary doesn't want them to. I don't know, there could be lots of different scenarios. So we put the control in the primary because that's, after all, why you have a group and why you have a primary.
Yeah. So maybe the thing we do is we that just is defaulted to on, so that if you're in MCR, the restrictions happen at the MCR level. So you can book for anyone through open booking, but it's up to the broker to restrict that type of restriction. So if people are underage, it's up to MCR to do that kind of permissions check. And therefore they would do that at the MCR level only. And it's likely that if you logged into Flow and tried to make the booking, you couldn't actually, because you'd have to give permission explicitly in Flow to make the booking. But the permissions don't get respected then for within the MCR or any broker. So I'm basically suggesting taking it a step further. We don't respect the permissions at all and put all the onus on the broker to figure it out, because they're going to be doing this across 3 systems potentially or more. So rather than trying to make it really complicated by trying to encompass all those different permission systems, we just say it's up to the broker to decide to do that. And I guess they would have to agree with different operators that their permission system was fine from the operator's perspective.
That seems messy. In terms of the conversations that would have to happen, feels very difficult. I mean, it feels like it's been hard to talk about this in this group, about the different permissions models, and leaving that as a kind of out of band conversation with sort of come to an agreement and then implement that logic in the broker. mean, it's sort of tempting from my perspective, but it feels very onerous.
Yeah, it sounds like the last thing. It's really the question of who can book for who. It's what, how we allow that. Whether we surface that complexity. Okay, well, so I was going to say, well, what we've currently got in this spec does cater for that in the admin, non-admin sense. If administrators can book, other people can't, and there's a primary administrator, and the primary is the person that can make people administrators. That actually does exactly what we're talking about. It's a very basic permissions model, admin or not admin. Admins can book. It might be that there's an age restriction on who can become admins. So maybe your admin, maybe your privilege escalation call, your make this person an admin call fails because they're too young to be an admin. That would work from the age restriction perspective. And then we've got the most basic of permission models covered.
Yeah. I don't understand. I sort of don't understand the user flow though. Like, how does this look to the person who's on the other side, the end user using the broker?
So it probably is similar to what Stephen's describing, where you've got the people in your group and you basically tick a box against those of them that can make bookings.
Right, but with the possibility of an impedance between what's set on the broker side and what's set on the booking system side, right?
So it might be that when you set one to make bookings, there's an error that comes back and says this person's too young to make bookings within GLL or within Everyone Active. So therefore, you won't be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, runs.
The problem is though, because we're standardizing across systems which have different policies, and we've got one group, I think there is a point here where we're gonna have inconsistencies and errors like that just has to be, I mean, hopefully for most people, it won't matter. Like you'll just be like, okay, well, my 6-year-old son can't book in Everyone Active, but maybe can book in GLL, fine, or whatever the age limit is. But we can't do anything about that other than changing the policy of those operators.
Yeah, I guess that's right. I was concerned at how you communicate that inconsistency in the user experience, but yeah, I don't, given that the user experience has to reflect the reality, which might just be quite patchwork. It's not really navigable. And
to be honest, the most likely case here is parents booking for their kids, I guess. And that's quite straightforward because there won't be any age limits that will affect that. The parent will be able to create child accounts, maybe add their partner. So it probably doesn't affect most cases in terms of booking. But there is the potential for inconsistency.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what the worst case scenario is in terms of errors. So leaving aside 6-year-old books for adult, I mean, are there situations where you could actually end up with a sort of inconsistent state? Never mind. Rewind that thought. Never mind. I think it's fine, but very messy.
Well, luckily, messy from the broker's perspective, I suppose, in terms of booking systems, worrying about implementing this would be straightforward implementation. But then we are talking about group reconciliation as a problem, which, I mean, there's a bunch of problems the broker needs to solve here anyway. Like, what if you've got 2 kids and one of them exists on Gladstone and the other one exists on Flow? The broker is going to have an interface that allows you to link the kids that exist in either system with its own view of the group, and then etc. Just once at the beginning. Once they've linked them, then it's kind of fine. But again, I don't know if you in your iPhone, if you've noticed, if you've ever got, or if you've used an iPhone, or maybe Android does this as well, if you've got multiple address books, it will notice when 2 people are the same person and say this person's contact card is a combined contact card from 2 people. and do that for you. It's probably the broker probably needs to do something a little bit like that. This person in this group consists of this person from GLL, this person from Everactive, this person from Play Football or whatever, and so it's three people in one, but that I might only need to get displayed, in a certain view, because most of the time they're just there and you're just using them. And in the case that I think MCR is most concerned about, which is the creation case, it's really straightforward, because all we're doing is just adding kids to the account.
Mhm.
And then they can just make bookings for their kids and everyone's happy.
Okay, I think the modeling actually does work. I think putting the onus is on the broker to have some kind of logic and user flow that is intelligible. I guess the onus on the systems is to return useful error messages.
Mm-hmm.
How do we do that? We don't have that in the example, I don't think. Have we got that in one of the appendices?
No, but that can
Okay.
be added. I'll add that as a note. Response, yeah. Yeah. Just one last question for clarification on this point. Is it possible to have two primaries or change the primary within the group? Debbie, Stephen.
Sorry, Debbie's dropped off.
Oh, she had to go.
I think it makes. Sorry.
No, sorry, Nathan, carry on.
I think it does make sense to be able to change primary, because we should be able to expand this to organizations as well as just individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And in the organization case, if you got like a club, and you could potentially like move admin quite a lot around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I propose then in that case, oh, sorry, Stephen, what were you going to say?
I was going to say something very similar to Nathan, because it's not these accounts aren't just necessarily for family relationship accounts, are they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, perfect. In that case, proposal there I would propose would be we extend our administrator member to level to administrator member and owner, where owner is the primary in the sense of what we've been discussing. You might have more than one owner, but it sounds like most systems will restrict you to only one owner, as in only one primary, and that primary can get moved. So I think owner and administrator as terms are kind of used within other systems in that sense. So maybe that might be intuitive. So then we just have an error message returned. If you try and make someone an owner, well, I suppose if you make someone an owner, then the previous person stops being an owner potentially, if there's only one owner allowed in the account. Does that work for people?
Can one then change owner?
Yeah. So if you make someone an owner, then it would. Well, I suppose there's a question about what either it will make another person, maybe it will make two people owners, or it will. Which I think you can do in YouTube, or it will just remove the previous person.
Is this to throw the cat amongst the pigeons a little bit? Is this not all a broker concern? And for the booking system, the only concern is, can this person book on behalf of this other person? So how the broker models that with groups and administrators and primaries and whatever go bananas. But from the booking system side of things, how they model that is also up to them. So they might have groups at primary, but it doesn't really matter. All that the broker needs to do is tell the booking system, this person can book on behalf of this person, and then there's no need to bake into the spec all of this sort of stuff, which is inconsistent across all the systems anyway. It's just this booking process, which is what the open booking thing is all about, is allowed by this person on behalf of that person.
So is that, instead of groups, are we saying it's kind of a list of what is it, like a tuple, like a list of?
Yes, as in all you're doing is you're saying that this customer account can book on behalf of this customer account, and then when that's updated on the broker side through however function that is, groups, dependencies, dependents, whatever, you then just run through that list and update the I don't want to even say permissions, but the kind of allowable functions for one account on behalf of another account, etc.
That's a really interesting idea. If that was the case, then the way that you would maybe that list is a per broker list, and it starts with, it's a totally alternative model, but it's a per broker list that could start with the default from whatever the system's got, or maybe the entries that are configured on the system side. So for example, if someone logs into Flow and creates a group, then those people have entries that are already in that list because they're set in the system, and that's done. If the broker adds new ones to that list because of whatever permissions have been granted, then they're added only at the broker level. So the system, that doesn't need to be reflected in the flow in the other side of the system.
Well, it could be though, because the broker would say this account is now saying that they want to be able to book on behalf of this account. Send that information across to Flow, and Flow can then update their groups accordingly if they like. But
the question there is, how do we, because that it could be possible that person can book on behalf of that person as part of two different groups. So if we're operating at a different level of abstraction here, where we don't include groups, then it's going to be difficult for people to map them to groups.
But why do we need to map them to groups? In terms of the open booking spec, we just want to allow for people to book on behalf of other people.
No, yeah, sorry, I agree. I think we don't need to map them to groups for the spec, but in terms of translating that into something the user could see within Flow, they might need that mapping to exist. But we don't. If it was only if it was limited just to the broker, if those permissions were added just for that broker and they existed within the system, then we wouldn't need. What do we need? I mean, to be honest, at this stage, as we're talking out of the box, we could even be saying, passing auth keys around, because the broker has permission to book from one person to another based on who they've got authentication to access. So, at one level, we maybe don't even need to have those tuples stored, because all we need to know is whether one person can book on behalf of another person based on what groups exist in the broker.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't even necessarily need to be, well, yeah, I suppose the concept of a group is a useful one. I mean, it's, as we've been saying, it's almost always going to be families, isn't it? So the broker might decide. I think there's two different. So there's a family, which is a person booking on behalf of a person, but then to expand it to the organization's scenario, that's different. I mean, what do you have then? You have the organization is a member of the group, and then there's other people. That just doesn't make sense. I think
you know what you do, I think, maybe, is we just don't even worry about it. At one level, we could literally just allow anyone to book on behalf of anyone from an API standpoint. And then literally what you're doing is you're saying the customer is person A, the attendee is person B, and I'm just going to assert that as a booking system, and it will be so. As a broker, and it will be so. And the booking system just deals with that and assumes that the brokers sort the relevant permissions to make that possible. And so therefore, that actually is a brilliant solution because it bypasses all the syncing of groups nonsense that might be needed, as long as the group exists on the broker side, which is up to the broker to make sure. And obviously that there's got to be a good trust relationship between the broker and the bookings and the seller, as would need to exist anyway, to make sure everyone's happy with the way that those groups are formed and etc. Then this is a really super simple solution, in fact, because you don't even, we take all the constraints off. There's possibly a GDPR concern, but just on the surface of it, though, that would seem to be a lot easier. We remove complexity from all sides, unless I'm missing something. It's basically broker knows best. Which is something similar to how we other things work. I mean, there's a trust that the booking the person is that. Well, it's yeah, because we do have a low trust in terms of, or even close to zero trust in terms of using OAuth. So there is a little bit of a kind of inconsistency there. And you could book on behalf of someone that you don't have permission to book on behalf of, and therefore that's the GDPR concern. Therefore, get their personal data.
But then, I mean, how that problem still exists with. Oh, I suppose the way you get around that with groups is that you invite them to the group and they must accept that invitation first, and that's the
yes.
So, but I mean, you could have something similar in that you say this person wants to make bookings on your behalf. Is that okay? And
yes.
I mean,
a light invite mechanism that works through the API. That's good.
Yeah.
And therefore, as long as that mechanism is being used, you can make bookings on behalf of that person. So we don't have groups, we just have people that you've invited and people who've accepted.
In terms of flow, though, acceptance by a child, what are the rules around that?
Well, I think what we're talking about is actually totally API layer, just for GDPR concerns. So let's say that you've got a group, you're trying to add a child to a group. Mm-hmm. What's happening in the background is that you're taking the auth key of the parent and you're sending an invite to the child using that auth key. Then you're taking the auth key of the child and accepting the invite. So you need both auth keys. You need both parent and child to be authenticated in your system in MCR to be able to send and receive the invite. Once that exists, that link exists, then the bookings can be made. And then what you're really doing is querying from the parent side. You're just querying to see who can I make bookings for, and there's a list. And you're just adding to the list.
Right, and the parent just accepts the authentication on behalf of the child, and that's an established right or obligation of the parent.
Well, so the parent, well, it's the system that's doing that behind the scenes. So the system is the one that's impersonating the child, because they in that case, for example, the child actually already, well, okay, hang on, there's two things. So if I've created this member, I'm going to have access to book them because I've just created them. So that's easy. The situation we're talking about really is I've got two parents and I want to book on behalf of the other parent. So the other parent needs to log in and accept the invite. Really is how it should work in the MCR system, you know. And one parent logs out, the other parent logs in, accepts the invite. You log back in again, you can book the other person. So it's just done, and then that would work with OAuth because when the parent logs in and the other person logs in, that invite is there. They accept the invite, and then they log in the other side again. So it's really just what we're basically doing is the same as what we've discussed here. It's just we take away the concepts of groups and owners and administrators and everything, and we just talk about the raw permissions. And we implement the lightest possible mechanism that makes that still GDPR compliant.
It simplifies things a lot. I mean, it's nice. Yeah.
Yeah, it also means that for systems that don't have a big group structure, it might be easier to implement for them.
Yeah. And it's nice. It feels like it's a good standardized approach, and that it's representing, yeah, the bare minimum that's needed. And any system has to be implementing at least that kind of capacity
Right.
for it to work. Yeah. Okay. That does seem a lot more elegant and doable, and also just easy to think about.
The only thing that's subtle there is that the group joining a group implies a lot of those changes. So let's say there's a group of 5 people and I've joined it, and the administrator says I can book on behalf of any of the 5. So now I'm going to need to, well, in the background, the broker is going to need to send invites from me to the 5, and or the other way around, from the 5 to me, whichever way it is, and then go to the other side and accept them, which it can totally do. I mean, actually, you know, that's the point though, because that would only be possible if the broker had still got working auth keys for all those people in the group. So the broker's going to have to do a little bit of legwork to maintain those groups, and make sure that everyone has access to everyone's stuff within them. But
again, that's a broker concern.
Yeah.
In a sense, as in that's you're thinking with your admin hat on as opposed to with your open play hat on potentially there, right?
Well, not even I'm in. I mean, I'm in would pass this through. It's poor MCI users that would, the you know, the Kinetic Insight developers that would need to work with that. But,
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't make sense to. I'm in to create a group abstraction on top of what isn't an abstraction. You know, if we're going to get rid of it, might as well keep it minimal, because it'll be the most flexible. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just about how that plays out in reality. So I'm just thinking, like, if you've got a group of 5 people, from MCR's perspective or any broker's perspective, it'll look like everyone can book for everyone. Only when you actually interrogate using the individual API keys, those individual accounts in the group, where you find there's gaps. Do you see what I mean? Because it's a combinatorial problem. You've got a group of 5 people, everyone can book for everyone. You know, that's potentially 25 different, is that right? Or whatever the thing is, different combinations of links between them that needs to be maintained and checked. So to check that, you'd have to make 5 API calls, I suppose. You'd make 5 API calls, one with each auth key for the 5 people in the group, and then when you get the results back, you would check to see what invites were there and which ones were accepted.
Sorry, this is very interesting and useful, but we also have 3 minutes on the call.
Yeah.
So it seems like the next action here is, I guess, raise this as a GitHub issue and we can continue conversation there, because this is a fairly large redrafting.
Yeah, it is. But it's a potentially simplifying one.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it's incredibly promising. I'm just trying to think how we continue this conversation, particularly that we're now going to have a bit of a hiatus.
Yeah, with over the leave. Sure. Yeah, cool. I mean, yeah, great. I'm happy to start a GitHub issue on this.
Okay, great, cool. I suspect Debbie would be happier with this as well, but we can confirm that in 2022. So I think with 2 minutes, I'll just say, are there any concerns anyone wants to raise outside of, I suppose, really year-end concerns? We've made it probably 90% of the way through the spec. How are people feeling? What's their confidence on this? And how far do other people feel that we're 90% of the way through?
Yes, but the last 10% always takes 80%. As they say.
Oh no, that was the worst way to phrase that question.
Oh yeah. Positive end to the year, guys. That's what we want.
Stephen, what's your temperature?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily disagree. I think Matthew's spot on, actually. It's the 80-20 principle, isn't it?
Right, okay. Nathan.
I'm a little bit optimistic. I feel like we're probably not 90% of the way there. I think we're more like 80% of the way there.
Nick, I feel like you're the perennial optimist of the group. Let's close on your reflections.
Oh no, it's all on me. Well, I'll phrase it differently, and I think this could have gone a lot worse. I think we've given how far we've gone through this and where we are. I think actually it's looking incredibly positive in terms of the alignment to the previous discussions and how it all looks like it's coming together. So yeah, I'm hopeful that we're not talking about. I mean, this is a really good rewriting of a thing, but this is like right at the end. I mean, we've covered all the sections now, so maybe we're in a situation where the rest of it is refinement rather than rewrites, which is really positive. I mean, if we've got two major changes, which is the feeds and this, that have come out of this conversation, then that's really good.
And I feel like 2021, it could have been a lot worse. I think that works for the year as a whole.
Let's see what we say on the other side of the new year. Hey?
Okay.
What date are we picking up? Is it the 6th?
I believe so. Let me just check.
It
might not even be scheduled past that point.
I think it is scheduled. It might be worth cancelling out of the calendar the ones before, just for clarity. Not that anyone's.
Yeah, that's right. We've got one right now for the 30th and the 23rd. Okay, yeah, I'll cancel those. You'll get updates about that. Thanks, Nick. And with that, I'll wish everybody happy holidays away from booking spec for most people. Yeah, see you on the 6th and online before then. Thanks a lot, all.
See you later.
Thanks, everybody. Bye now.
Bye.